Since 6 centuries, there are Roma in Brussels. How they did arrive here, and are they nomadic or sedentary? Currently, more than 95% are sedentary, whereas Roma were nomadic centuries ago, also in Western Europe. To better understand Roma, we have to look at their historical background. Between 500 and 1000 years after Christ, different groups moved out from North India, the Punjab region. It's not clear why. Was it because of religious wars at the entrance of Islam, or were they freed from slavery? Different groups, in fact, settled in Europe, where they were called Roma, in the Caucasus, where they were called Loms, and in the Middle East and Turkey, the Doms. In Europe, they were given various names. The groups that arrived in Western Europe in the 15th century said they were pilgrims who had to leave their land, Little Egypt, a place in the Peloponnese, to atone for their apostasy from the Christian faith. They were called Egyptians, and this name changed gradually to Gypsies, Gitans, Gitanos. Some of them showed a letter of protection from the king of Bohemia, and they were called Bohemians. So the first sources of presence of Roma in Brussels, they date from 600 years ago. They were itinerant craftsmen, traders, and artists. Their descendants still call themselves Manus or Sinti in the Netherlands, and they still partially live in caravans, for instance in a caravan site in Anderlecht. From the 16th to the 18th century, their nomadic way of life was no longer simply accepted. Roma were declared outlaws and were expelled and even killed under the guise of pagan hunting. Several regimes pursued assimilation policies and forced them to sedentarize. In the period between 15th and 19th century, Roma were also massively forced into slavery in Wallachia and Moldavia. The slaves were called Tsigan, which come from the Greek word athinganoi, the untouchables. This was a name of a religious sect in Greece in the Middle Ages that considered the non-believers unclean. This term disappeared in the 11th century and came back several centuries later to denote the Roma slaves. So the Tsigan, this term has a negative connotation in Eastern Europe. Slavery was abolished in 1856, which caused the second great migration wave of Roma to the west, also towards Brussels. The descendants of these groups are still travelers, Roms, and living in caravans in, for instance, Anderlecht, Haren, and so on. In the 20th century, communist regimes make their entrance in Eastern Europe, which pursued a policy of assimilation of the Roma, causing a cultural break with their past traditions, crafts, language, and nomadic way of life. Then we jump to the Second World War. On the 15th January of 44, the infamous Convoy Z departs from the Kazerne d'Aussin in Mechelen to Auschwitz-Birkenau, with on board 351 Roma, including Brussels families. Only 12 of them survive. During the whole Holocaust, finally, 500,000 of European Roma were exterminated. This meant more than 70% of their total number at the past. So this percentage is even greater than the percentage of exterminated Jews during the Holocaust. Due to their persistent, difficult social position, Roma awareness of ethnic identity increased. And on the 8th April on 71, the first Roma World Congress was held in London. And there the term Roma was adopted as an official name. Also, a flag has been chosen, a national anthem, Jilem Jilem. And the 8th of April will be, from then on, the International Roma Day. The 60s and the 70s, there was a labor migration from Yugoslavia to Belgium and Brussels due to the bilateral agreements with President Tito. For instance, many Macedonian families came to Brussels, including Roma. Over the years, we see a good integration of these families in Brussels due to work, mixed marriages, and so on. In those years, working with Roma and travelers in Brussels was very small scale and was mainly done from a Christian perspective. In 1986, for example, the non-profit organization Rom Integratie started a well-known and long-term educational project for caravan children, for traveler children in the Regenboogschool in Molenbeek, where 2 generations of travelers from Brussels region went to school. Unfortunately, this project stopped in 2011 after 25 years of experience. As a consequence, the level of education of the new generation of traveler children took a sharp dive again. On the 9th November 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, so which meant the end of the communism. It was followed by a period of economic crisis and poverty, which is the breeding ground at the moment of a very strong increase in discrimination, racism against the ethnic Roma minority in Eastern Europe. As a consequence, in the 90s, the third and largest wave of migration of Roma to Western Europe started, mainly because of poverty and ethnic discrimination and even persecution. In Brussels, Roma pioneers arrived from Romania at that moment, for instance from the region of Arad and Timișoara, and also from Bulgaria. They get here because they had the necessary financial means, but they lived in illegality for many years. These were also the years of the Balkan Wars and a period of refugee flows from the former Yugoslavia. For instance, in 1999 to 2004, there was an ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, causing a lot of Roma refugees to come to Brussels and thereafter spreading towards other Belgian cities. Also in 1990, after almost 1.5 centuries, Belgium and Brussels Rom travelers finally received a full Belgian identity card. However, they were already registered in the foreign register since 1933, and from 1941 on they carried the gypsy card introduced by the Nazi regime. In 2004, Foyer estimates the number of Roma in the Brussels region at 6,500, many of them without legal resident status, and therefore mainly dependent on survival. That's why Foyer decides to set up the Roma and Traveler Service to work specifically with this target group. In the following years, the first intercultural mediators of Roma origin will be recruited. The 1st January of 2007, Roma and Bulgaria become members of the European Union, by which Roma can obtain also a legal residence in Belgium, at that time mainly through the status of independent. So this gives them also new rights and opportunities for integration in Belgium. From 2010, as a result of the economic crisis and increased intra-European mobility, a new growing influx will arise, often of poorer Roma groups and homeless families. Until today, we see an increase of Romanian Roma families with children who come temporarily to Brussels to beg. They live on the streets, in emergency reception centers, SAMU Social, or in self-built barracks. In 2014, since the European labour market opened for Romania and Bulgaria, the number of Roma in regular jobs starts to increase gradually. At that moment, the large influx has already stabilized. Foyer estimates at that moment a number of around 10,000 Roma in Brussels. From 2014, a new influx started, so from Syrian refugees, including many Doms. This large new group that often experienced considerable deprivation in Syria poses new challenges in the field of education, employment, and social integration in Brussels society. So municipalities are starting to pay more and more specific attention to the present Roma groups, and at the end of 2014, the first municipal Roma action plan will be approved in the municipality of Anderlecht. Also in Molenbeek, Saint-Jos, Brussels, and other municipalities, the first Roma are recruited in the municipal prevention teams. So today we count more than 11,000 Roma in the region of Brussels, plus around 500 travelers who have a link with Brussels. Multi-problematic situations still occur, problems with extreme truancy of certain youngsters, homeless Roma families, begging children, and so on. In the last 20 years, the Brussels region has also experienced severe degradation of social position of travelers, mainly as a consequence of the strong decline of number of caravan sites, which threatens their lifestyle in a mobile habitat. But luckily, we see also positive evolutions. Roma from Eastern Europe are much more oriented than before on sustainable residence and integration in Brussels. They find their way much more easily to school and are much more also aware of the importance of schooling. Most Roma work in one way or another. There are many who are working as an independent, but we also find more and more Roma in regular job contracts. And of course, there are the many Roma youngsters who were born and raised here in the meantime and who are the pioneers of a new modern generation of Roma in Brussels.